Hey guys, today's RC workshop is on the XT150 power connectors. That's a 6mm bullet connector. I want to give a shout out to Vass from Aussie RC Playground. He did a video fairly recently, I think maybe a couple months ago, going over all the different variety of battery connectors for RC cars and planes and whatnot. Everything from Dean's connectors, tiny Deans, to Traxxas, to EC50s, to Hobbyking connector, XT90s, and finally these 150 amp XT150s. So thank you for that informative video, because it actually turned me on to these, and I was looking for something for my vehicles that run 4 to 6S 8 scale vehicles that was high powered and would reduce the cabling necessary when I run batteries in series. Instead of using these three-way connectors to tie your batteries together to run them in series, I can get rid of all of that and add minimal amount of cabling, keep the power very clean with these high power connectors. They actually interconnect if you so choose, or they can easily be separated for, like I said, if you want to connect them in series. So really a big fan going in. I never used them before. So I went to, I know he got them from Hobbyking. I'll leave a link in the description for where I got them. I ended up getting them at Hobbyking, long story, but I'll try to make it short. It's a buyer beware story. I'm not sure many people are familiar with this. He may not even be. But Hobbyking was sold out of them. So I looked around on Amazon. I found a bunch of sellers, so obviously I went by the reviews like everyone else does. There's one called the AMAS, A-M-A-S-S, or AMAS, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. But they were selling them as XT150s. They look like XT150s. They come in a pack. They came in a pack of like 6 red and 6 black. So I bought like a pack of each, and male and female, so I can make 6 full pairs. I was using it for my battery, so all I needed was red and black. So they come in, and I attempted to solder them. Now, let me show you. This ended up being a successful battery, so it's not going to show the problems, but I just want to use this as an example. In fact, this red one here, the female that's on, did work. It was one of the AMAS batteries, and I don't know if you could see, there was actually a color difference. If you look at these two, the one on the left is Hobbyking, and this one is AMAS. It's more orangey, where this is more red. I don't know if that's coming through on camera. Also, the outer jacket, the outer plastic sleeving on the one from Amazon, the AMAS connector, is much harder. I'm not squeezing the bullet, but it's very reluctant to flex, whereas the Hobbyking one flexes much easier. It's a softer material. Initially, I thought that was a better thing, but when I tried to go ahead and solder these together, I was running into lots of difficulty. Now, I didn't use any sort of jig, and it's a regular bullet connector. I've done them before. But if you'll notice, I hope this comes through, the connectors don't reach the end. So if you touch a piece of metal, you're touching plastic on the end. They're recessed, you can see here. When I did the ones, this is Hobbyking, this one is AMAS, but I used the Hobbyking inside, so it worked. The ones from Amazon, especially the male, that was the big problem, would actually stick to the edge of, it wasn't recessed like this. There was no gap between the brass fitting and the plastic. So if something metal came in contact with it, it would actually touch the metal. Whereas here, the metal is more, I would say, a good 1/8 of an inch recessed in. So that bothered me, and I thought I was putting them on wrong. I wasn't. It was just a matter of pulling them till they click. They could be, and they were really hard to pull, really hard. I had to use like a pair of pliers to pull them, and I thought for sure I was doing something wrong. Well, I wasn't. I went back. I even looked at Vass's video, and his were recessed like this. So it was bugging the hell out of me. So I went back and I looked at the connectors, and guess what? The connectors are different. I'm going to zoom in and move this out of the way in hopes that you can see this. But they are not the same. The connectors on the table here are all Hobbyking. This is the set you get. They give you 2 black, so I ended up buying 2 black, 2 blue, and 2 red. That makes 1 set with male and female brass fittings each. So that's 1 complete set. You get 5 in the bag. So I ended up buying 2 bags. They have a lot of batteries and ESCs to convert over. So these are this is exactly what you get here from Hobbyking. 3 colors, 5 times. So 5 of each. I'm going to move some of the stuff off to the side, but I'm going to leave a couple of these brass fittings just so you can see what's going on. Okay, so let's move the female to the side a minute. The biggest problem was the male. Here's the Hobbyking one. We'll try to line up on the line so you can see. And this one is actually a mass version. I don't know how well you can see it, but it is actually longer. I'll pick it up and see if you can tell this way. They are not the same length. When I marry both pieces at the bottoms, you can see that this one is longer. So that was the reason why it was sticking out. The grooves are kind of different also. There's a little groove, that's how it's held in. There's a plastic piece, like a rib inside the housing, and it clips into here, and that's what keeps it in. They were a pain in the neck. This is actually, you can see the solder on it. This was a failed attempt. Here is the mate, the female. Also slightly different. It's not, the reason why I was able to use that one is because you'll notice that these are the same size, at least. Now the grooves are in a different spot. The grooves aren't exactly the same, but I was able to get away with that. But after what I found out, I tossed all those connectors that I got from Amazon, and I'm strictly using Hobbyking. So I would recommend that you guys just stick with the ones from Hobbyking. They're much easier to deal with. I don't know why they're different. I don't know if they're like a knockoff brand, if they're not really XT. I mean, they say XT150 on them. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. It says, camera going to focus, I don't know. There you go. Anyway, it says XT150, but they're not the same. Also, when I go to clip them together, now here's the female from Amazon, right here. And now they have a groove in the sides of these where you can actually connect them if you want to keep them connected. Like this. If you want to keep them connected and not separate them, there's kind of like a tongue and groove thing where they slide into each other and they make one fitting. Of course, you could just pull them apart after that and keep them as separate pieces. But even that's a little bit different. When this is the one from Amazon, and here's the Hobbyking one. So I should just be able to slide this down on top of it. And guess what? She doesn't want to slide. So they are substantially different. And I'm not sure anyone's aware of that, but you are now. So I would stay away from those. I also came up with an easier way to solder these. I made myself a little jig. Very simple. It's just a block of wood. Let me get some of this stuff out of here. Just a block of wood. You'll see I have this is the female. Fits in here. The male is slightly smaller diameter, so I made the hole slightly smaller. Anyway, they sit in there nice and neat. Keeps them in place. I don't burn my fingers, and I can easily work on them and keep the wire. Basically, you gotta not fill it, but put some solder in here, get it good and hot, tin out your wire, put it straight in, and let it dry that way. You want a nice straight connection. You have to have the connector on the wire first. So you put the connector that you want to put on the bare wire, slide it all the way to the back, tin it, put it in, do your weld, then you just grab it and yank it forward, and it'll click in. Voila, it's done. It should have been that easy, but it was a nightmare until I went to the Hobbyking connectors and made the jig. So simple, but just works out great. I actually, not only do I use it for this, but I figured let me expand on that, and I made some different size holes. You can see it's just wood right here, it's just painted wood. Tiny, tiny holes for like servo ends, for servo clips, for J connectors or anything. I made a slotted one if I'm doing a Traxxas connector. My son has a Stampede, so since that only runs on 2S, we only run it as 2S. I don't need a XT150, so I just leave the Traxxas connectors on there. But all my other vehicles that run on 4 to 6S are all going over to these XT150s. I tried it. My son sent in that he ran last week. Flawless, works great. I love the connectors. And now that I'm using the Hobbyking ones with the jig, it's absolutely a breeze to do. Even this, I made a little section where I can drop a Dean's connector in, and it'll just hold it in place where you weld it on. And so this is, believe it or not, even though it's not rocket science, you might say it's a little primitive. You know, why go online and spend, you know, $30, $40, $50 on a similar thing, a polished aluminum, this, that, the other thing? You don't need that. You just need something to hold your pieces. I expanded on it. Anything I need to connect. I have some different size bullets. So if you have a 4mm bullet or whatever, and you can customize it to whatever connectors you use, just make the appropriate size hole and make your own custom jig for what you use. So if you use, you know, XT90s, you can make a hole that would fit that connector, and so on. So even though it's a simple thing, it's a big time saver. So enough of my babbling. Let me take a quick break. I'm going to get the soldering iron together, and I'm going to convert one of my batteries, which is currently running Dean's. Everything I had was Dean's up until now, and this is a 3S pack, which I'm going to run in series. It's the same, I have the exact same pack. It's a 7200 milliamp 3S and 3S, so it'll be a 6S 7DC. And I'm going to just disconnect the connectors and go ahead and put the XT150s on. But just to be safe, cut one at a time. So what I normally do is I'll cut this red, and then I'll do the red connector. I'll take, if I'm going to put the you know, the male connector in red, whatever I'm going to put on here, I'll slide it back onto the wire, connect it up with my connector, and then go ahead and slide the piece forward until it clicks in, and then my connector will be done. Then I'll go ahead to the black one and do the black one. This way you don't have the possibility of them touching. It's just a little precautionary measure, but you know, you're dealing with some voltage here, so, and you don't want to ruin these batteries. They're not cheap. So I would definitely suggest that, and where possible, use heat shrink tubing. You can use heat shrink tubings with this. Again, make sure, obviously, this goes on the wire. Slide it all the way down because it's going to get pretty hot here, and you don't want it to start shrinking. So by putting it to the back of the wire, it'll stay cool until you want to bring it up. If there's any gap at all between the wire and the cup, the wire going in, you could slide this up to the cup, not over, because there's a rib here that actually clips into the plastic. So you want to slide your heat shrink tubing right here to butt up and then shrink it down. That way it will not affect how it sits inside the housing at all. And from the other side, this will be in here, you'll have a little extra protection for the wire. And so that's my preferred method of doing it, but I've done it both ways. They work either way. But just to be anal about it, you know, if you want to do that, that works great too. I'll be back in a minute and I'll show you how I do this one. Okay guys, well, while I'm waiting for the soldering iron to get good and hot, you want to definitely use a lot of heat with this. I went ahead and stripped off roughly 1/8 of an inch of insulation. These are 10 gauge wires, about 1/8 of an inch or so. If you want, go ahead and measure the cup that it's going to go in. You can just take it, and before you even thin the wire, and just see it should sit all the way at the bottom of the cup, preferably, so there won't be much or any wire showing. You want it to be, you know, pretty much right to the wire-ish. Could be a tiny bit, that's fine. It's maybe make it easier, a little easier to solder, but you don't want a lot sticking out. I went ahead and I peeled back. I slid on the XT150 connector, and you can't see it, but in here is some heat shrink that I slid all the way to the bottom. So, okay, she's just about at the temperature. So I'll clean off my iron. You always want to start with a good, hot, and clean iron. And then I'm going to go ahead and just apply some heat to the cup. Let it sit there. See, this is the beauty of the jig. No burnt hands. Let it get good and hot. Doesn't matter. And wood is a pretty good, you know, insulator, so it doesn't really conduct heat that well. Obviously, it'll catch fire if it gets hot enough, but That's not going to happen here at all. I could leave this thing on for a long time and that would never happen. So I would take precautions though. If you're new to soldering, definitely take safety precautions. This stuff is very hot and it burns easily. I like to put a dab of solder on the iron just to keep it nice and flowy without getting any dirt on it or ashy. And then just go ahead and put some into the cup. Now, don't fill the cup because when you put the wire in, it's going to displace some of that solder, so you don't want it overflowing. See, that's the thing with these connectors that you got to watch. Just mush it around in the cup so now the solder coats all the sides, so you get a good connection in there when you drop your wire in. Okay, now I'm going to leave that for a minute, come back and just apply a little heat to the wire first. Not too much, just get it warm. And then I'm going to just drop some solder on it and just tin your wires up. So once you get a nice flow going there, you're good to go. Put a little more solder on here. Now I'm going to heat the cup. You want to get this to go straight in. Try to get the wire to go straight in. Again, I'm heating the solder inside the cup. I'm bringing the wire over. It's now touching the iron, so that's getting hot. Everything's getting hot. Then I'm going to push it down into the cup. Basically straight down into the cup. And that's what you want to do. You want to really get it into that solder. That's basically it. I mean, if you want to come back and do a little fill up with the solder, you can, but you don't want it to go over. You don't want it to go over the edge, because that's where it will have an effect on how it fits inside that that rib, inside that connected as a plastic rib, and you don't want solder impeding that at all. So that's it, nice and straight. Let it cool. As you can see, it's nice and straight, and it's deep into the cup. Almost none of the wires even showing, and it made good contact on all sides. It was a good weld. So now it's very hot. It's even hot up here on the wire. So if I was to slide the heat shrink tubing up right now, once it hits here, it'll start shrinking down from the heat already on the wire. So I'm going to take a little break and let that cool down, and then I'm going to come back and slide the tubing up, and you'll see pretty much the rest of putting the connector on. I mean, once you know how to put one connector on, they're all basically the same. Same thing with the female side. You're just using the other connector. And notice how I left the Deans on the negative side, so I don't have a short here. I'm going to put a connector on this, then work on the other one at a time. Just always double check and triple check your connections. Make sure you're putting the right plastic housing on the right side. You know, this is a female red, and this is a male red. So you want to make sure that you're putting the right connector on the battery side that you want. The mate will go on the ESC side. So I've made that mistake before where I was doing it quick and not paying attention. I put the wrong connector on. I had to take it apart. Now, here's another thing. If you ever have to take it apart, the easiest way I found, if you have like a butane torch like this, is you just fire the torch up. I mean, this is the easiest way. I mean, it gives you a nice flame. Use a pair of pliers because it could get a little bit hot. You go ahead and just heat up the fitting itself, upside down. You want to just heat the fitting up, and it will just drop off. It's going to be hot, so make sure that it drops off in a place that's not you or something that's going to melt. So again, you can use the wood block if you like and let it drop right on there. And this way it comes off basically intact. You could just reuse it. The solder still actually is inside and everything's fine. It doesn't disrupt the wire. And I found out that works good when I've had to take it apart and redo it. Rather than putting the soldering iron and work it back and forth, it's the least invasive method if you have that. If not, go back to the soldering iron, get it good and hot. You'll have to spend some time on it because it's such a beefy connector, but use a pair of pliers or a helping hand, keep it in there until it separates. This is actually cool enough now where I can slide this connector to the front. Now, notice I'm butting it up against the housing. I'm not going in any way, shape, and form on top of the brass housing at all. And then I'll just take my soldering iron, move it back and forth quick, just touching the sides. It'll shrink down. This is not necessary. A lot of people probably don't do this. They probably just put the connector on. But I like to do it anyway. Just covers up that wire just in case. I mean, that little sliver of wire that's still outside the brass fitting is not really going to come in contact with anything because it's inside the plastic housing. But call me anal or whatever, but I just like to do it. You know, I'm going to do this once for this battery, for each connection. I'd rather spend the extra time and do it the right way. And so there's your connection. It's all the way up to the brass fitting, but not at all on top. You can hopefully see the grooves there, and those grooves can clip into the back side of this connector. So if you put up a pull, you should hear a click. If you pull it, sometimes you got to give it a little yank, like that, and then it's on. It basically just, the rib inside the plastic clicks in the groove, the connector's on. It even spins freely. I suppose if you really wanted to be anal, you can, but it would destroy the mating, because there's a tonguing, like I told you, there's like a tonguing groove over here. That's like the male side, and then each one has a female side and a male side. So you could just slide the female side on top, and now they're together nice and easy. If you do what I'm about to suggest, you won't be able to do that. But if you put two pieces of heat shrink on here earlier before doing the connector, do the first one, slide the connector up like I did, and then if you have a fatter one, pull that up here, and you could actually shrink it over the back end of the connector, and that would close off this gap in the back altogether. It wouldn't spin, and you would not be able to connect these like that if that matters to you, but that's another option. Anyway, this is a completed connector. You can see it's recessed the way it's supposed to be, and it's perfectly done. And this is the way I've done all my batteries so far. I have these two I just got in the other day, and this has worked perfectly so far. So I do recommend these. Thanks, Vass, again. And with the method using the Hobbyking ones, it's really a breeze to do, and anybody can do it safely. Now it's time to get to my second connector, so I'm not going to waste any more of your time. It's going to go just like the first one, only this side's going to be the female brass, and the outside's going to be the male black plastic fitting. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you guys have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Have a good day.